There we go.
Hi, how are you, John?
Hey, Ronaldo, I'm doing good.
That's great. It's good to have you looking fresh. You're looking younger. No,
Yeah,
you're
Friday.
looking. It's Friday. Yes. It's good. It's good to have you. I was looking forward to having you on the show. How have you been?
Good.
Great. There's a lot happening. I have so much. Actually, I wrote three main questions for you, but let me do the official introductions. Good afternoon or good evening, whatever time it is in the world. I am Ronaldo McKenzie, and with me is Mr. John Anthony Castro, the U.S. 2024 presidential candidate, who is joining us on the show. And he is no stranger to the neoliberal round, guys. And welcome to the podcast. And we are happy to have him. Welcome to the show, John.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
And I have three. There's lots happening with you. I have three main questions. One, ABC and mainstream. I've been trolling them, but ABC and mainstream news media seems to suggest you're not running and not Republican. So, question: are you running and are you a Republican? Are you challenging Trump, saying that Nikki Haley is the first to challenge Trump?
Yeah, I know, which is kind of hilarious because in court filings, the Federal Election Commission already conceded that I am, in fact, the 2024 Republican presidential candidate. But look, I understand the media's concern here. You know, I know the knee-jerk reaction is to get a little upset and be like, I feel like I'm being snubbed. But at the same time, I prefer the term earned media, means that, if you get covered, it's because you earned it. And so right now, I know that there's just a lot of doubt about, like, who is this guy? Came out of nowhere, filing this major lawsuit against first the Federal Election Commission, now against Donald J. Trump personally. And I understand also the media, they're not attorneys, right? The attorneys that have looked at this case realize every single attorney that's looked at this has told me, holy crap, John, like this case, like you've clearly established Article 3 standing. You clearly have a viable claim under Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, and the media just doesn't realize it yet. And it's perfectly fine. So you're going to get the benefit here because you've been covering this very early on. Of course, when what they're waiting for, and what I was told by a reporter from NBC was, and this is supposedly, even though I've seen them contradict this, but they've said, in accordance with journalistic ethics and integrity, we have to wait until the case clears dismissal before we can cover it. Because basically, anybody can sue anybody for anything, right? I can sue my neighbor for looking at me the wrong way this morning and it hurt my feelings. But whether that case is going to survive dismissal on a Rule 12b6 motion to dismiss for failure to state a proper claim is a question. So usually they wait until a case clears the dismissal phase, and then after that to the non-lawyer reporters basically means that this case is legit, and so then you'll get more coverage. So right now, the people that have covered it so far is Bloomberg Law, because again, they're lawyers, lawyers/reporters, and TalkingPointsMemo.com, which is another really good source. And they tend to, again, they have lawyer journalists on staff, and so they can review a complaint like mine and determine the bona fides of it right away. Now, I just want to jump right in and give you an update on the case. So, of course, very intentionally, I filed this case on January 6, 2023, the second anniversary of the attack on the United States Capitol. That was very intentional and very symbolic. And the first thing that Judge Eileen Cannon did, and mind you, for those of you watching that don't know who Judge Eileen Cannon is, she's the judge that unconstitutionally intervened in the criminal investigation of Donald Trump and appointed a special master. What happened in that case is the FBI and DOJ appealed her intervention to the United States Court of Appeals for the 11th Circuit, and the 11th Circuit determined that her decision to exercise jurisdiction over the case violated the separation of powers principle that's in the U.S. Constitution. So her action was unconstitutional and therefore an abuse of discretion. So she's already, and then after that, there was constitutional law scholars all across the U.S. There was not a single constitutional law professor in the United States that didn't question her impartiality, because it was very clear she abused her discretion. It was a novel form of judicial obstruction of justice, the likes of which we've never seen before. And it was very clear that that action was deemed unconstitutional. So what we did is, when she got randomly assigned to the case, we in fact filed a motion to recuse her. Technically, it's called a motion to disqualify. But we demanded that she recuse herself on the basis that she had already demonstrated a lack of impartiality towards Trump, who appointed her, gave her a lifetime appointment as a federal judge, and abused her discretion in his favor, judicially obstructed a criminal investigation, and engaged in conduct that deemed it to be unconstitutional by the 11th Circuit. And she, of course, denied the motion to recuse. And so we filed a writ of mandamus to the 11th Circuit. So that case, or that issue, is currently on appeal. Now, Trump moved to dismiss the case on February 15th.
Yes, I saw that.
Yeah. And so in that, it was funny too. The arguments, quite frankly, weak, very, very weak arguments. So the first, they attacked it on standing. So, for those of you in law school or lawyers, put on your thinking cap here. They attacked it on standing. So they said, of course, if a person doesn't have standing to bring a claim, then the court doesn't have subject matter jurisdiction. And so the first claim was he doesn't have standing. Standing has three elements. The three elements are that you have an injury, that the person you're suing is the one that injured you, and that the court can remedy that injury. So those are the three arguments. Those are the three prongs of Article 3 standing. The beautiful thing here is that she is Lindsay Halligan. She's Trump's attorney. She regularly comes out on One American News Network and very far right wing, in the fringe news outlets. And so that was her main argument was he doesn't have an injury because he's not a bona fide candidate for public office, which that has never been something that the judiciary has been willing to get into, the bona fides of a candidate, whatever that means.
And
we'll get into that right now.
You are not the bona fide candidate.
Yeah, that's what she said. And then she didn't argue traceability, because obviously if there was an injury, it's clearly traceable to Trump. But then she argued, oddly, redressability. She was like, there's no remedy by the court. But the thing is that she doesn't seem to realize basic federal law is 28 USC 2201 is the Declaratory Judgment Act. That is the remedy. And so I thought it was humorous that she even made that argument. It was a very bizarre argument, but it created an opportunity for me to say that she probably was asking for more definitive statements on that. And so I elaborated that on a motion that we're actually preparing right now, and we're going to file on Monday. It's the reply brief to the motion to dismiss. So, and then the next. Say that
again. What are you filing on Monday? What are you filing on? What are you filing on Monday?
We're filing on Monday the response to the motion to dismiss. So all of our counter legal points. And then she said, even assuming that there is an injury and that it's redressable by the court, there is no cause of action. I'll get into that separately. So real quick on the injury part, the United States Court of Appeals for the DC Circuit has already recognized something called political competitor standing. And so if you are a political candidate and you compete against for the same office and within the same party, then you have what's called political competitor standing. And the logic behind that the U.S. Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit said is, well, logically, if you are a fellow primary candidate, then clearly you're going to have an injury because a person competing against you is going to reduce your votes. So we automatically, logically find an injury. It's clearly redressable to the opponent. And clearly the remedy is the declaratory judgment. So you meet all three elements of standing. It's, again, basic federal law 101. So I can't even believe she made that argument. But we're going to clear past that. The real argument here is whether I've stated a claim upon which relief can be granted. Now, what I'm citing is Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. Now, typically the way that it works is a federal question regarding the Constitution can certainly provide jurisdiction to the court under 28 U.S.C. 1331. But you'd still have to normally cite to a statutory provision of a remedy that Congress created.
Yes.
And so she said, you're asking the court to declare him constitutionally ineligible, but there's no remedy, there's no statutory provision that allows that. That would be true if Section 3 of the 14th Amendment was not self-executing. So if a provision is deemed to be self-executing, then it provides an independent cause of action. It provides both a jurisdiction and a cause of action. Now, again, she claims that this has never been done before in the history of America, but that's actually not true. There was a 1976 ruling, Bivens versus, and this is the actual name of the case, Bivens v. 6 unnamed agents, and basically had to do with the Fourth Amendment violation. And in that case, I think it was actually 1967. But anyways, in that case, it was back then, the DEA was called the Bureau of Narcotics. The Bureau of Narcotics did a no-knock search warrant, bashed in Mr. Bivens' door, raided his home, and it turns out that there was nothing. And not only that, but they actually didn't even have reasonable suspicion to do that. They were basically just being a-holes. And so Bivens turned around, sued them for actual damages. And there was no question about the damage. He had $15,000 in damages, the broken door, broken inventory. So he was able to indisputably prove $15,000 in damages. And so he brought this lawsuit in the Eastern District of New York, where his home was raided in the Bronx. They denied it. They said, sorry, you have to cite a statutory provision. You can't just cite the Fourth Amendment. It went to the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit. They dismissed it as well. And they said, no, you have to have a statutory grounds for the action. It went to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said, if we don't find an implied cause of action here, it renders the Fourth Amendment irrelevant, right? What's the point of the Fourth Amendment if you can't enforce it? And there's no question the Fourth Amendment was designed specifically to restrict the power of the federal government with regard to American citizens. And so they said, if we don't exercise equitable jurisdiction over this and find an implied cause of action, we're effectively rendering the Fourth Amendment to just words on 200-year-old paper. And so Lindsay Halligan's claim that the Supreme Court, supreme law of the land, has never recognized implied causes of action is wholly without merit. But here's the thing, is that it doesn't even hinge on the Bivens logic, because this whole question and debate, is Section 3 of the 14th Amendment self-executing or not? This actually came up in 1867 in the trial of Jefferson Davis, the president of the Confederacy. And I get into this in the brief that we're going to be filing on Monday. So I'll send it over to you, and your law students can read it. It's a really amazing legal and historical analysis of Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. But what happened is the Civil War ended. The Confederates surrendered, and Jefferson Davis was placed under arrest. He was going to be tried and prosecuted for treason, for laying siege and war against the United States, against the Union. And so during his criminal trial, his very crafty lawyer came up with a very good argument. And he said that Section 3 of the 14th Amendment effectively reduced insurrection to a political crime. And that political crime is only punishable under Section 3 of the 14th Amendment with a lifetime ban from public office. And so therefore, charging Jefferson Davis with criminal treason violates double jeopardy, because it places him at risk of life or limb twice. And so at that time, the person presiding over the criminal trial of the former president of the Confederacy, Jefferson Davis, was United States Supreme Court Justice Salmon P. Chase. Now, Justice Chase at that time was actually considering running for the presidency of the United States. And in particular, he was going to be running as a conservative Democrat. At that time, the Democrats were in the South, and the liberal people were the Republicans. So at that time, the conservative, racist Democrats at that time, not now.
And that is, I read that
discussion a whole lot later, because there was a big shift in the 60s and 70s. But back then, the Southern conservative, former Confederates, let's just call them, he wanted to appeal to them. And at that time, the fact that he was presiding over the case, he knew that's going to completely derail I'll never secure the Democratic nomination if I piss off the Confederate South. So he agreed with Jefferson Davis's argument that Section 3 of the 14th Amendment was self-executing. Here's the thing.
Yes.
If a provision of the Constitution is self-executing, it has an implied cause of action, which greenlights my lawsuit against Trump. Now, there's more to this. So then Salmon Chase, 1868, runs for president. Big flop. He doesn't even secure the nomination. He never resigned from the Supreme Court, though. He stayed Supreme Court Chief Justice. It was the only time in history we've had such a not only politically active, but actual political candidate Chief Justice. So he was obviously sour about it, decides that he's not going to really be loyal to the Southern Democrats anymore, even though he literally saved Jefferson Davis from going to prison. But then a couple of years later, 1871, 1 year before the 1872 presidential election, another case comes to U.S. Supreme Court Chief Justice Salmon P. Chase's chambers. This case has to do now with a black man that was convicted of a crime, but his argument was very novel. His argument was the judge that presided over my case fought for the Confederacy. And because Section 3 of the 14th Amendment is self-executing, he was ineligible to preside over my trial, rendering the guilty verdict null and void. So then Salmon Chase was just like, okay, we can't just let this black man off on a technicality. So then he completely reverses his logic and rules that Section 3 of the 14th Amendment is not self-executing. But clearly he was being racially biased at that point, because he was obviously very honest when it came to Jefferson Davis. But now that, it could result in this, unique situation where, somebody not part of the ethnic majority was coming up with a very unique and novel argument. He turns around and does a complete logical 180 and rules otherwise. And so at this time, this really confused Congress and what is the equivalent of today's U.S. Department of Justice, because they were just like, well, is it self-executing or not? And so then after that, Chief Justice Chase runs for president again, but this time he runs on the liberal Republican ticket and trying to appeal to liberal Republicans, but now they rejected him because they said, you just made it harder to enforce Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. Get out of here. The whole point of Section 3 of the 14th Amendment was to ban Confederates and the insurrectionists from being able to politically compete against, pro-unionists. So after that, Chief Justice Salmon Chase's credibility is in the toilet. Congress gets pissed off and they decide to enact criminal enabling statutes that allow the U.S. Department of Justice to sua sponte on their own, bring a removal action against somebody that's disqualified under Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. And what they do is they actually, half of the Tennessee Supreme Court, there was 9 members. They brought removal actions against 5 of them. The majority of the Tennessee Supreme Court got actually criminally prosecuted for holding office in violation of Section 3 of the 14th Amendment and were actually removed under this criminal enabling statute. Now, what then racist commentators at that time said, or I should say pro-Confederate commentators at that time said, is they said, oh, the fact that Congress just enacted enabling legislation is proof that Section 3 isn't self-executing. That's not the case. That had to do with criminal enforcement. And also it gave the right for the Department of Justice, which normally wouldn't have standing under Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. They're not the party directly injured. It gave them standing to go after these people. But it still doesn't change the fact that Section 3 of the 14th Amendment was in fact self-executing, does provide an implied cause of action. But here's the thing. Here's the most beautiful thing of this. If Trump goes into court and argues Castro's claim should be dismissed because Section 3 of the 14th Amendment is not self-executing, he's arguing that double jeopardy is not a defense and that he can be criminally prosecuted.
Okay. Wow.
So basically, pick your poison. Is it going to be a lifetime ban for public office, or are you getting indicted by Jack Smith? So
the argument you're presenting is really puts him in a corner.
It's checkmate.
Oh, yes. And some time ago we did a show and you talked about the fact that there was a lawsuit before and there's a lot of trial and error and you've been learning. And we talked about that, every time you file a lawsuit and it if you come up with a challenge, you go back to the drawing board, you and your team, you do research, and you come back with a stronger argument. And so, but that's quite powerful. So you, in a sense, you guys are ready to face all the challenges from Donald Trump or the opposition to your claim to your lawsuit.
Yeah, correct. So,
oh wow,
yeah, I mean, honestly, like every attorney that is a constitutional scholar that really understands these principles has looked at this and said there's simply no way that he wiggles out of this. You're going to be stuck with one or the other. Ultimately, if you honestly look at the history behind Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, the Supreme Court would have to really stretch logic to argue that it's not self-executing. It would be utterly ridiculous to say that it's not, because the reason behind it, the best argument that they have is that if Section 3 of the 14th Amendment was self-executing, then why is there a Section 5 of the 14th Amendment that says Congress can enact legislation to enforce any of the provisions in the 14th Amendment? But see, the thing is that if you look again at the history of Section 5, it had to do with enforcing Section 1, equal protection, because they knew that there were going to be racist, belligerent states that, again, refused to treat people equally, regardless of the amount of melanin in their skin. And so Congress at the federal level could enact enforcement legislation against the states. Section 3 doesn't have anything to do with that. I mean, there are some, enforcement actions at the state level, but it applies even at the federal level. And the federal is not going to pass enforcement legislation against itself. That doesn't make any sense. And also, that would be arguing that sections 2, 3, and that 2 and 4 with deal with issues like validity of the public debt requires enabling legislation. That's ridiculous and ludicrous. Like, it doesn't make any sense.
So this argument that you are presenting, which you are saying that there is a precedence. This argument, has it been since that time? Has there ever been any other case like your case? Or
no, and the reason is what happened is I forgot the name of the president that took over, but basically, here's what happened. Section 3 of the 14th Amendment caused an uproar, and it was a humiliation for the Confederacy at that time, because it basically meant that if you fought for the Confederacy, you couldn't even be elected to a city councilman, because it says no office in the United States. Not if the local dog catcher is elected, you can't be elected to that position. And so what it allowed was the Unionists from the North, what they called the carpetbaggers, they all came down and took over all the political power positions, and the entire political power infrastructure of the South got taken over by pro-Unionists. And so you can imagine like the one super far liberal person in Alabama suddenly being governor, senator, and congressman. You know what I mean? Like, the people are going to be pissed. And so,
yes, that is true.
So the people at that time were very upset. They viewed it as basically foreign occupiers, right? Who are these people that have never lived in Alabama, and all of a sudden they hold all political power in Alabama? So there was already brewing sentiment of a possible second civil war. And at that time, the president, who I want to say was Hayes, but don't quote me on that. But the point is that the president at that time basically said, you know what? Section 3 is causing a lot of friction. And for the sake of bringing the country together again, I'm going to do a blanket amnesty of everyone that fought for the Confederacy. So you can run for office again, you can get elected to Congress again, Senate, city council, county office, everything. Let's just everything go back to normal. And the South promised that they would not pick up arms again. And so he did this. He waved his magic wand. Everybody that fought for the Confederacy is hereby forgiven. And so, sure enough, everybody agreed to lay arms down. That caused that the boiling calmed, everything simmered, and we moved on. And so, but Section 3 is still there. It's part of the United States Constitution. We just haven't had a violent insurrection since then. And
oh wow,
So
this brings powerful. That makes your argument really powerful. Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry, I interrupted. You said this brings.
No, that's okay. That's okay. And so, one thing I do want to point out that this comes up a lot with right-wing commentators is they say, "Oh, what about people that rioted at the BLM riots? Like, why isn't that an insurrection? They burned cars and burned buildings. Why aren't they banned from public office?" So, one thing I do want to elaborate on is the distinction between a riot and an insurrection. The Yeah, the main issue, to oversimplify it, of course, is that an insurrection is a riot, but it has an unlawful political goal that is designed to undermine the democratic systems and processes that are in place. That is the key difference. So you can bash windows, you can flip cars, burn them. That's a riot. That's not an insurrection. But when there is a very focused effort to disrupt the certification of an election, part of the democratic process, and it's very clear that there are illegal actions built in within that, which is primarily why Mike Pence's attorney said, don't do what Trump's asking you. That's illegal. You could potentially go to prison for that. That's very clearly trying to undermine the democratic processes and systems as it relates to the American electoral process. And when you add that to it, now it's an insurrection. So that's the only difference, is that a riot, right? Like Martin Luther King and Malcolm X one time explained, it's the boiling point of the frustration of the people. They know something's wrong with the system, but they don't know what. And so they just lash out. And that's why, a lot of people will point out, like, oh, during the Watts riots and LA riots as well, 90% of the businesses that were burned were Black-owned businesses. That doesn't make any sense. Well, again, it's because it wasn't organized, right? They're just lashing out in anger and frustration because they just know something is wrong with the system. I'm being treated differently because of the color of my skin, but I don't know what the problem is. So they just burn the first thing they see out of pure frustration. But when that violence turns into a very focused effort to undermine democratic processes, that's what transforms a riot into an insurrection and makes Section 3 of the 14th Amendment potentially applicable if that person ever took an oath of office, which obviously Trump did. So because the whole idea behind Section 3 of the 14th Amendment is that you violated your oath of office. So basically, if there was a private person that expressed support for January 6th before they knew all the facts, they're not going to be barred for life from public office. This is only going to be for politicians that had and military officials that had already taken an oath of office to uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States, and then because of January 6th, violated that oath.
Oh, this is powerful, and this is great. I've always said that to you, and let me reiterate. You're saying the distinction between an insurrection and a riot is, of course, is the goal, the end goal, or the goal. It's very important to study the goal, and the goal of an insurrection is, you say that it's a challenge to an unlawful challenge to democratic system, as against riot, which is a response to systemic injustices and to discrimination, which is powerful. What you're doing, this case provides a great opportunity for this country to probably look at itself and to think about, and then just the framing of the Constitution. When they were putting the country together, and they had an idea of what this country will look like. And it's great that you can actually point to something from way back to challenge Trump and to provide a response to his dismissal. This is powerful. I have one question.
Sure.
Now, I have this kind of provocative, maybe. Lindsay Kelly, because ABC and mainstream news media, they're challenged. They're saying that they're saying that Nikki Haley is the first Republican to run against Trump, announced publicly declare her challenge to Trump. And I know you have said that ABC and mainstream media, they're waiting on this legal issue, but whether or not this legal issue is there, you are still running for president. So I'm not sure why they are running. Why are they waiting for this legal matter to say that you are running? I'm not understanding what that have to do.
So, I'll say this. Right now, according to the Federal Election Commission, there are in fact 162 people that have registered as 2024 Republican presidential candidates, 162. And so, the vast majority of those are simply just trying to, get a kick out of seeing their name listed there. They're not serious. They have no intention of actually launching a presidential campaign. None of that, right? Like, they're not like me. Like right now, I'm already looking at real estate in New Hampshire. I'm looking at either purchasing or renting, and then that's going to serve as campaign headquarters. And, I'm putting together the campaign infrastructure already. We already have, campaign signs. In fact, let me just show you it real quick.
Yes, please. Let's see it.
So, I mean, this is a sample of when I ran for.
Oh, nice,
Trump.
nice.
Oh, I don't know. It's not focusing there for a second.
Okay, see, yes.
Okay, yeah. But the point is that we already have the campaign video. We obviously have the campaign website, johncastro.com. I mean, we have T-shirts, bumper stickers. We have pretty much everything ready to go. Now, the media has obviously never heard my name before, and they don't know. Some people have actually speculated that I'm working for Ron DeSantis. They think that I'm trying to get. Yes, they've even thought that I'm trying to get rid of Trump to clear the path for Ron DeSantis, and we've analyzed that, and I'll tell you why. Even some members of the Democratic Party leadership don't like what I'm doing. When they ran statistical hypothetical polls between Biden versus Trump, it's 50-50, and it looks like Biden would be able to win. But if you run hypothetical polls between Biden and DeSantis actually performs a lot better. And there's a risk that if DeSantis were to run against Biden instead of Trump, that DeSantis would actually defeat Biden. And so I have been told by certain people within the Democratic Party that, that they would actually prefer Donald Trump to be the nominee, because every data analytical tool that they have suggests that Biden would have a better shot at being reelected going against Trump than DeSantis. So, in other words, you're going to have the Democratic thought leadership, strategic leadership, opposed to this, and then obviously you're going to have the Trump camp opposed to this. And so, as oddly as it is, the people that would likely be first to cover it would be Fox News, because they want to get rid of Trump to clear the path for DeSantis. But of course, they don't want to give me and boost my image as well, give me a soapbox to be able to spew some of my more centrist, reasonable views to their viewer base. So it makes sense that I'm being shut out of the mass media. But at the end of the day, I'm not doing this for media attention. I'm doing this because I genuinely am running as a Republican. I genuinely am trying to neutralize a constitutionally unqualified competitor. And we'll see. But I do know this, that when I'm successful, number one, my place in American legal history is going to be fixed forever. And number two, they can't cover this story without mentioning me or talking to me. So I fully intend on earning the earned media in every sense of the term. And it makes me actually work harder, because, again, when it clears dismissal, I'm going to have the power to subpoena Trump, to subpoena Mark Meadows, to subpoena everybody involved in January 6th. I would have a power that's greater than the committee to investigate the January 6th attack, who couldn't even enforce their subpoena against Trump. And so the position that puts us in is one of extreme influence. And we intend very well to establish that Trump did in fact provide aid or comfort to the January 6th insurrectionists. And it's quite simple and straightforward that he's done. So, and I really do think that even the Federalist Society and the conservative wing of the federal judiciary is going to agree with me. They don't want Trump. They want to clear the path for DeSantis. So we believe that we would even have a majority of the votes on the Supreme Court to basically get rid of Trump. So I think it's a done deal. It's just a matter of how quickly. I'm projecting that by December or January, this issue would be directly before the U.S. Supreme Court.
Right, and I know I saw where you said that it will be the U.S. Supreme Court will hear your case against Trump, although he's trying to dismiss that. Yeah,
I mean, like we already got 3 votes right out of the bag, just because the 3 liberals on the court. And then you have the 3 appointees of Trump. Chief Justice John Roberts is on our side. That's 4 already. So, you got Alito. You got Kavanaugh, Gorsuch, and Amy Coney Barrett. If I'm pronouncing her name correctly. Long story short is we already know we have 4 votes. Roberts and the 3 liberals. I would guess that if one of them sided with us, it would be Gorsuch. And the reason is
Okay.
that Gorsuch is a libertarian and at heart, and his judicial philosophy is right in line with this. So
Yes.
whether it's Gorsuch or Kavanaugh, I think one of them would be wanting to. I feel like they recognize that their appointment was tainted because of all the political controversy behind it. And so I think they would want to rule in our favor as a way of proving their impartiality and actually banning from public office for life the person that gave them their lifetime appointment to the Supreme Court. So long story short is, we've obviously thoroughly analyzed not just the legal, but the political angle on this. And we believe that it's a done deal.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you. And we're going to wrap it up from here. We're trying to be shorter. Great. We did well, 30 minutes. But thank you so much. By the way, I had a question. Nikki Haley is now going to be running. What do you think her chances are?
So what she's doing is she's actually auditioning for the VP pick. So, Trump is... Trump is very interested in picking her as a VP, but basically he wants her to go out and serve as almost like his agent. So he basically instructed her, Nikki, if you want to be considered for my VP pick, I need you to run for president, gather as much support as you can. She used to be a Democrat, right? So she's going to be able to appeal to moderates, and then she's female, and technically she is an ethnic minority, and so she is going to be able to have a lot of appeal to moderates in the center that Trump would otherwise be incapable of getting. And that's what you want in your VP pick, right? And then not only that, but she's a woman. And so that's generally societally perceived as softer than the more coarse and rough-edged Trump, and his toxic personality and trait. And so if you look at it that way, she has all the perfect characteristics of a perfect VP pick. And that's why Trump is likely going to pick her, and also to neutralize some of the racist claims, right? Because, she's an ethnic minority. And so it's just like, hey, we have basically, if it were to be Biden and Harris again, it would be a white man with a female minority on both sides.
That is true.
And
yes.
So, she's just auditioning for a VP pick. Okay. So if in fact, if somebody wanted to attack the bona fides of a presidential candidate, I would attack Nikki Haley's. She has absolutely no intent. Right? She went and kissed Trump's ring and begged for permission to run before she did. I mean, that's not what we want in a commander in chief. Somebody that goes around, begging people for permission to do things. So that is what it is.
Quite a powerful response. Thank you. That is great. And finally, by the way, I put together while you were talking about Lindsay Kelly, and I put together maybe a conspiracy theory, because I'm saying that the accusation is that ABC and mainstream media is not reporting that you're running. Lindsay Kelly is in court saying that he's not running, while at the same time mainstream media is saying it's not reporting that you are running. Do you think there's some kind of collusion between the Trump and mainstream media and the strategy involved with this?
No, because I've spoken with the mainstream media. So I've spoken with ABC, I've spoken with CBS, NBC. They've all sort of repeated the same thing, which is that they're waiting for this to clear dismissal. And I think also it's becoming a joke in right-wing circles, where everybody always thinks, now we got Trump. Now we got Trump. You know what I mean? And so it's causing fatigue with viewers, even with for example, Rachel Maddow viewers, where they're just tired of it. Every time somebody says, we're about to get Trump, they're just like, we've heard that for the 1000th time. Yeah. So I think they're starting to be, I think they're starting to be a lot more cautious about what they report, and being like, we want to see this progress a little bit more. If the court thinks that this has meat, then we'll wait for the judge to confirm that. But other than that, we don't want to get our viewers' hope up, and then there's a big womp womp let down, Right. And so, so I get it. I totally appreciate it. That's why they didn't cover the FEC case. And then ultimately it did end up getting dismissed for lack of standing, because they said, hey, the FEC doesn't have the authority to do this, to determine eligibility. So, So I would say let's hold off on that. Now, I would say that if this clears dismissal and the media still doesn't cover it, then something's seriously wrong. But
yes, probably
but
nefarious.
I actually like the idea that the media is not covering this right now, because I would love the idea of everybody waking up one day to the 11th Circuit remanding this case back down to head to trial and clearing the standing issue and the claim issue, because at that point it would just create a firestorm. And I would love the idea of a stunning upset, right? Like it's a Rocky story coming out of some bump out of nowhere.
But I'm telling you, I believe it's going to be a missed opportunity. The argument sounds, your seemingly view on top of it, the research, it's logically sound, and I can't wait to hear I can't wait for that to happen. And guess what? The Neoliberal Realm podcast was right on top of the story, and we are glad to be. We're all about making popular what was the monopoly, because we are about serving the world today to solve tomorrow's challenges. Mr. Castro, thank you so much for joining us on this show today and for making the Neoliberal Realm podcast a podcast that is serious and a podcast with some amount of integrity. I want to thank you. Thank you for making us a serious podcast, and you have helped us to do that. I want to thank you. Continue to come onto the show. We appreciate you, and we are praying for you. I'm a man of prayer and a man of faith. And when I pray, things happen, and I believe that God will move you to the next level. I believe you will realize your dream, and I pray even now that God will promote you, that God will grant you his favor, and that he will shine his hand upon you. We thank you for him and his family. Keep him safe, keep him sound, bless his business and all that he does and what he puts his hand on. We thank you for him. In your name we pray. Amen. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Take
care.
care.
Ronaldo.
Yeah, man.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, man.